Hello, in the new video. Today we're gonna take a look really quick at the meta changes for Season 12 for the Go Battle League, for the Great League here. I made a small presentation for this kind of course here. Maybe I actually use this tool a little bit more often because I think it's pretty cool to showcase some changes pretty easy on a more, I don't know, like cleaner way. Else we can take a look a little bit on what changed in the season, a little bit about like debuffs and debuffs and what will be now meta, what will be a little bit less viable. Spoiler alert, the changes will not be as crazy, to be honest. We have a lot of changes for move changes, so a little bit more of a Wild West feeling going to be in the beginning, but if it comes to the crazy meta, the changes will not be crazy, but there will be changes, and we're gonna talk about this a little bit. We see here very quickly some of the buffs and the debuffs, especially debuffs. You only really had like two here. The Zapkin is now not doing as much, like it doesn't debuff all the time. I guess it goes to 50%, at least I think it is. We don't know yet, but I calculated everything with 50% debuff chance here. The Walrein now needs more energy for the charge move Icicle Spear, which is going to be the biggest change. It's going from 35 most likely to 40, but yeah, it's basically definitely 40 now. And then we have some buffs that are interesting here, especially the Lanturn and the Runeriga is going to be very meta viable. But the others that are here are also going to be interesting. We have the Fairy type buff, we have the normal type buff, and we have also Steelix with now Psychic Fangs, which is going to be very good in a lot of calcs. Let's take a look at some more buffs in direct comparison. Here, for example, we have the Lanturn, which is now going to be able to do way more damage here. The first one that you're going to see here is the Spark variant, which looked already pretty okayish in the meta, but had some really hot answers along the line. Now, thanks to the access to Surf, it gets to Surf way faster. The second version is here than the old variant for Hydro Pump and Water Gun, which looks pretty horrible. Then you see the new version, which is then Spark and Surf, where you now win, for example, against Medicham, where you can win against something like Obstagoon, and you have way better matchups along the line. You also will now be able to win against Registeel with Spark, which is cool. And then on the right side, you have the version of Lanturn, which I think going to be the best. And that's going to be Water Gun and Surf together, where you're now going to be able to also beat something like Stunfisk, which would be a hard counter otherwise. And you're still going to be able to basically beat everything else before, like sometimes like Rakronet, for example, can be a little bit of an issue, but mainly like those Pokemon that you want to beat, you will be better off beating like this, and I think you're also going to be able to apply more pressure with the Water Gun compared to the Spark. Next up, we're going to see Runeriga here. The old moveset was of course horrible with Astonish, as you can see on the left side. Now with the access to Shadow Claw, you're going to have basically the best answer for Registeel. Registeel doesn't appreciate this. Stunfisk doesn't appreciate it. Actually interesting, it even would win against Swampert, but also Medicham doesn't appreciate it. In general, fighting types have a little bit of a problem here. Bastion, also Nidoqueen doesn't really like this Pokemon, so maybe it actually has more meta viability later on. But you win a lot of matchups here, which is pretty decent, and this Pokemon will definitely have some kind of impact, I would say at least. Going to be a little bit interesting how well it's going to turn out. Next up, we're going to have Registeel here. Here you see on the left side the version before. We know where they went still against the Altaria. On the right side, you see the version now with 50% chance. The difference is not big. You see here actually that Scrafty is now win for 50%, just because I guess the calculation goes straight for the Focus Blast instead of going for the bait move before, I guess, which helps out in this kind of case because you get, I guess, to the Focus Burst next time a little bit earlier, which allows you to win this matchup here, which is just a calculation thing. The matchup is not really different from the matchup prior because you just go straight for Focus Burst anyway. And Focus Blast didn't change. But for example, Altaria now is a loss because Altaria can farm you down. And a lot of matchups are a little bit closer now because if you don't get the debuff, it's going to be a little bit tough at least. Taking a look at the biggest change here, going to be Walrein. Walrein going to lose a lot of matchups, also like it doesn't look too crazy here, but for example against Trevenant it's closer, and I think even as a Shadow you would lose against Trevenant in the one-shield scenario now, which is kinda bad. You have the Lickitung, which you lose against now. You have a lot of matchups that are just a little bit worse because you need more energy for your charge moves, and yeah, this thing will have the biggest nerf. But if you look on the right side, it's still not horrible. This Pokemon is still usable, you still will be able to see it. But there's one psychological thing that's going to change a lot of stuff, which always happens if something gets nerfed. People just stop using it for whatever reason, even if it's still overpowered or like very strong, people just stop using it. So I would still recommend you to use Walrein and Registeel. Both of them are still fine, both of them are still meta, but I would at least suggest from like what we've seen previously. For example, the Registeel got nerfed already before, and everybody stopped using it, even though it was basically as strong as before, and the debuff wasn't like the changes they did weren't really that important. So I still think they're going to be good, but I still think it's going to change the meta because people are going to run them less than before, even though they're still pretty damn good. So, consequences of the nerfs: you don't have Walrein anymore, so like at least you don't have Walrein as often anymore, I guess. So things, especially the Nidoqueen, going to be a little bit more common, or the Trevenant going to be more common, also going to like the new kind of meta matchup as well. And you're going to see the Altaria more often as well. Altaria going to like this new meta without ice types and being able to beat Registeel now as well way more. So those going to be way more common, but changes from this, you see here, all of them will be able to beat fighting types, so it's going to be a little bit more of a downfall for fighting types in general. Fighting types will not be as good anymore, I would say, at least, because you have you have the new normal types there, but they're all not as crazy meta Pokemon, to be honest. They're all decent, but they're all not as crazy. I don't think we're going to see a lot of the new normal type Pokemon in general. But I think the fighting type's gonna get a downfall just because the meta shifts a little bit towards Nidoqueen, and all the other teams also a lot. Other things that's going to change for this is that you don't have as many Walreins and Registeels to farm down anymore, I guess. So like for the fighters, the debuffs are kind of the Pokemon that you were supposed to counter, and B, the buffs were on Pokemon that you kind of don't want to face. Like the Trevenant doesn't really have to scare the Walrein anymore as much, or the Nidoqueen doesn't also have to scare the Walrein as much anymore. So fighting type still going to be viable. Like the downfall here might be a little bit too much. Like they're still going to be good. Like it's not that they completely horrible. Again, the changes, as said in the beginning, are smaller. Like they are not crazy. The meta is still going to be like pretty much the same, I would say. But there are like some more Pokemon that are getting into it, and some more changes in general, and maybe percentage on how often you see, for example, the Medicham. Speaking of the consequences of the nerfs now at the end, we have here the Nidoqueen and the other nerfs, the fighting type nerfs, and you're going to see here as well what also going to win from this all, especially with Nidoqueen and the Trevenant there now, which will definitely have a bigger place in the meta. You will have the Diggersby, which is going to be way better as well. You have the Skarmory, and also in general the team of Swampert, Skarmory, and Sableye going to be one of the best, I think, now. Like even with the Fairy buff, by the way, Fairy Wind itself doesn't really do damage, so Sableye still has a lot of play against all the fairy types, just because you're still going to do way more damage with the Shadow Claw and the good charge moves. So like Sableye doesn't really get affected by it whatsoever. Even against normal types, it still does a pretty decent job, because of course normal types also cannot hit you either with the fast move of Double Kick or Tackle now and Body Slam. So like they also rely on the secondary charge move, so it's basically a tie and not being super effective. And then Skarmory also doesn't really like to see the Walrein or the Registeel too much, so it's going to have a better time as well, especially if something like maybe Diggersby or the Stunfisk is going to be a little bit more common now. The Skarmory will also have a little bit of a better time. Again, the flying types in general are going to be a little bit better as well, like the Mandaboss. And yeah, this is going to be the changes in general. The changes are not going to be that crazy. Walrein going to have the biggest impact, that like basically negative impact. That's then going to be a little bit less common, but they're still going to be good. Registeel basically didn't really change. Like the change there will not change as much. That they just have the Zap Cannon already gives it more coverage, which was the main issue, not only the debuff, but also, yeah, in general, it's going to still be very good. And yeah, it's still going to be pretty much the same, but you have now a few more Pokemon thanks to the move changes in general, like the Miltank in the meta, and it's going to be interesting how it's all going to turn out. But that's going to be it for the video. Tomorrow there's going to be a video with 10 teams for 10 new Pokemon. That's going to be exciting. I hope I see you tomorrow, and tomorrow also the season starts. Remember to use your star piece. Thanks for watching, see you next time, have a great rest of your day, bye!